Slipknot, The End So Far album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Slipknot. These guys are Des Moines, Iowa-based metal legends and the nightmare of many a soccer mom in the late 90s and early 2000s. And for a time, I was super into them. Still, to this day, there's a lot of material on Iowa in Volume 3, the Subliminal Verses, that personally, I don't mind coming back to, even though I've just wrote off so much new metal. It's at least, some metal that from this generation that I enjoy going back to from time to time. And honestly, their follow-up, All Hope Is Gone, I don't think it gets enough credit. I think it was an artistic peak for the band. It has a lot of great material on there. But it was around the time of Chapter 5, the great chapter, that I drew the line. I drew it hard. I just did not listen to Slipknot for quite some time after that. I thought the album was an absolute disaster and easily some of their worst material, like by far. So much so that it actually made me question if I ever enjoyed the band back in the day, which, I certainly did at times. Now, the last time that we heard from Slipknot, they actually kind of took me by surprise. We Are Not Your Kind, Color Me Shook. I enjoyed what they were doing here. They were taking some big artistic risks between the All Out Life and Unsainted single, I thought they were putting out some of their best work in years. Almost, too good, honestly. I almost felt bad giving it the great review that I did, but I still do enjoy it. Now, that leads me to these new singles, which, coming into this, I thought they were a little weird, a little odd. It got me a little worried about this album. Now, let me say this. Stylistically, this album is the most experimental thing that Slipknot has ever done. For better and worse, let's chat about it. This album starts off with Adderall, and this really took me by surprise. This is an odd start for the band. It's very sunny, it's sort of psychedelic, it's almost spiritual sounding in parts. And yeah, this is certainly a Slipknot album, and I commend the risk, I really do. It's very different for the band. I think Corey Taylor's vocals are actually done pretty well here. But outside of that, I don't think this track really comes to fruition. I commend the risk, I commend Corey's performance, but everything else about this track just does not come full circle. It's bland, it's way too much of a left turn, and those choir vocals, they took me by surprise. It's different, I don't really like it that much. Also, this track is plus 5 minutes. It's a rough start. I personally think for this album, Slipknot bit off a little more than they can chew. Later on, we get tracks like Hell, which, honestly, yes, it's certainly heavy. Once again, I commend them, trying something different, but this just sounds like a rehashed Slipknot track with a few slight left turns. But it doesn't help the cheesy songwriting, and it doesn't help that I don't feel like they pushed this sound far enough. Even with this album's finale, I have to commend at least some of it. The atmosphere on this track is fantastic. It's dense, it's dark, it's heavy. It's deeply depressed too, and there's some really classy, I should say, nods to truly great classic heavy metal. But man, what a flimsy and borderline goofy finale. The lyrics to this track are so cheesy. It just ends up coming off awkward, and honestly, the group vocals, once again, which is something I truly love in music, once again, they come off more awkward than anything. Ironically, it's when Slipknot here is just kind of being themselves that they're putting out the best material on this album, like the Dying song. This is actually a really commendable track that harkens back to the band's glory days. I actually think it's done really well. This is just a new metal rager with vicious vocals, thunderous drums, and a great hook. It's also just melodic enough to stick with you. I dig this. I was initially a little lukewarm on the Chapeltown rag, but it has grown on me. It's kind of Slipknot by the books, but for this album, I'm actually kind of okay with that. And yes, it's a little cheesy, it's a little over the top, but I, for one, can actually, kind of commend that for a few minutes. It actually works well for this track. It's also just angsty as all hell. It's not a phase, Mom. And Yen has also grown on me. Initially, I was pretty lukewarm on it. It's definitely a different track from Slipknot, but it's one of the few moments here where their experiments really pay off. I love the piano-driven riff, and I love Corey Taylor's performance here. He comes off really sinister. And as far as a deep cut goes, I think Hive Mind's actually a really good one. As far as this album goes so far, it's the heavier material that I've been digging, and this track is no different. The riff is great, the performances are pretty damn solid all around, and not for nothing, this may be the most memorable chorus here. And Medicine for the Dead, I think this is the best track here. It's not like all of their experiments just flop completely. This is an odd one that definitely takes its time, but the very gloomy, emotional riff that works its way in is done really well. It is still out of their comfort zone, but for a few short minutes, it does sound right. It's very well layered, dare I say progressive at times, and the fact that it's over 6 minutes actually works to its advantage. And De Sade, honestly, like, a lot of these tracks go one of very two ways, but this one actually goes, in a pretty decent way. All in all, this is one of the coolest tracks here. The atmosphere is absolutely crushing. That alone is a big plus in my book. It's one of the darkest, most looming tracks here, and yes, I kind of wish Corey Taylor's performance here was a little bit more gnarly, had a little bit more of a bite to it, but overall, it's a really great track. Oh man, but compared to where they were a few years ago, they just sound kind of lost right now. This isn't nearly as consistent as their last outing, and a lot of the rest of the material here sadly just sounds rehashed. Like Warranty, instantly, this track sounds dated. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Slipknot just sounds incredibly desperate. They sound like they've recorded this track like 100 times. Acidic, right from the get-go, my thoughts on this track were meh. I mean, the opening riff is cool. That sounds like ripped out of classic black metal. But what continues is 4 minutes of an audible shrug. There's no heart here. There's no emotion. Why do these solos sound ripped directly out of Metalocalypse? And Heirloom, I mean, if you're a classic Slipknot fan, you might like this. But for me, this sounds like a B-side from their early years, but not a very good one. Like one that you looked at on a B-sides and rarities compilation and knew instantly why it was left off the album. I don't know, man. This album is kind of all over the place. I mean, I commend a lot of the risks that Slipknot take here because they are really trying something new on this album. And that's something that I will always commend. But consistency-wise, compared to where they were a few years ago, this is a vast fall for the band. And ironically, it's more along the lines of when they're kind of doing what they've done for 20 years that I'm more into the material here, like the Dying Song or Yen. It's a weird kind of past that we've come to with Slipknot, but I'd be lying if I said that I was super into this album. I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm feeling a very strong 5 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.